together, excuse me, as we have a very tumultuous past that has even divided us in death. So writes Dr. Tsepang Leuta, and she is beginning to look at the colonial and apartheid history, what it has done to our cemeterial spaces, and how we can begin relooking it going into the future in a democratic dispensation. We'd like to welcome Dr. Leuta to the program. Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to the program.
Morning, Azhar. Thank you for having me.
All right. So, this is a very interesting study that you've engaged in. What prompted you to look at cemeteries and how they have been designed in the past and what they could look like in the future?
Well, Azhar, my experience really spans a lot of interests, and having worked before with a lot of open spaces, for instance, parks, I came to notice that cemeteries were one niche that one could latch on to, because not a lot of people have done work in this area. Not a lot of people want to talk about cemeteries. As you may know, in most cultures, any death-related matters is taboo. So I was interested in this specific topic because I thought they were such a big part of our lives, yet not enough attention was given to them.
Mm-hmm. And the reality of the matter is that we are also running out of land space. I've seen the Avalon Cemetery, living in the south of Johannesburg many times, and the space is literally disappearing. How do we, begin to relook at the options that are available around the better use of cemetery land?
Azhar, I think where we really need to start is with, as the city is aware that they are running out of land, but most communities are not, or most users of this space or potential users of this space are not aware. So where we really need to start is with really doing an analysis of how much land we have left and by when it will reach capacity. And then establish that, okay, so much land is left, we have so many people in the city, and this is so much land we need for so and so many coming years. And then that way, we're able to say, okay, we have different types of people in our city, therefore we need to come up with different ways of addressing their burial needs. We cannot only come up with one blanket solution. Hence, now the city has to come up with, in the past 35 or so years, the city of Johannesburg has been practicing second burial. And I would really not note this as a new method. Hence, now you have the city looking into things such as cremation, such as mausoleums. But we do have many other alternatives that the city hasn't even introduced. And this could be, the reason could be people are still or have always been oblivious to cremation, and they're only starting to think about it now. They're only starting to get to know about it, how it works. So introducing others that might be terrifying to them could be a no-no. So for now, the city, I think what they have to do is really introduce those that are accessible to people so that they give people broader choices.
How did the colonial and apartheid history of South Africa affect the way we are now currently using or have our cemeteries spaced out?
So as you know, the South Africa's spatial structure was really shaped by its apartheid history, which then influenced both its social and political landscape. This, however, led to spatially and institutionally divided cities. As you may know, apartheid was really based on two major pieces of legislation. The first one being the 1950 Population Registration and the Group Areas Act. This ensured that there was strict separation of racial groupings and controlled influx into white areas. So we have cemeteries as one land use that reflects the country's spatial imbalances that were inherited from colonialism and the apartheid era. And this era somehow facilitated the separation or segregation that then resulted in unsustainable approaches to cemetery planning and provision. Cemeteries were developed along religious and racial lines during this period. For instance, we look at the 19th century, where religion really determined burial location within a cemetery, and this continued into the 20th century. However, it was at the peak of apartheid that this segregationist laws were then enforced that stipulated that cemeteries or burial spaces should be organized according to race and ethnicity. And this meant that cemeteries in your affluent suburbs were properly planned, while those in previously disadvantaged areas were not. And you find that in previously disadvantaged areas, an open space was arbitrarily identified and burial started soon after. So you have this separation of races and ethnicities within our cemeteries that has been perpetrated by apartheid planning policy. Yes.
I see in your research and article you asked participants in the research as to whether they would be open to social gatherings in cemeteries, as well as the use of green elements such as trees and grass to help with the tranquility of the area. And some were in favor of some of the ideas, and others opposed them. What were some of the interesting aspects of this research that you found as you questioned people?
So this research really entailed a lot of engagement with diverse stakeholders, diverse participants. I had key respondents from the city. I had church leaders. I had traditional leaders. I had, the religious leaders, like I mentioned. We had different organizations that are custodians of people's culture and religious beliefs. There were funeral undertakers and parlors. There were users of this space, as in the communities themselves. And some of the interesting things that came out really showed that these spaces are not adequately used, as people would indicate that they spend around 15 minutes in this space for burial and sometimes for visitation. Hence, they did not see it fit for the city or the municipality to invest so much money integrating green elements to make these spaces serene, to make them healthy, to make them beautiful, And part of the research really involved investigating people's perceptions towards alternatives to traditional burial. And what I found interesting was that the older people, who we may deem as the custodians of culture, were actually more open to things such as cremation than the middle-aged people. And their reasons were that what they want is a method that will be most cost-effective, whereas the Middle Ages were really about uplifting their social standing. And then you had the youth, who were not really interested in death-related matters. They still have a long way to go, a long life to live. So why bother thinking about such? So it was such an interesting study, quite diverse and versatile here.
Dr. Tsepang Leuta, thank you so much for that interesting discussion on a topic that's rather sensitive, cemeteries and its design, how we're looking at it in going into the future. Thank you so much, ma'am. You go well and stay safe.
Thank you, Azhar, for having me.
Yes, that was Dr. Tsepang Leuta from the University of Witwatersrand. She's in the planning department there, looking at spatial planning, the use of cemeteries. We know from an Islamic perspective that cremation is obviously not one of the considerations there, but we've got to look at perhaps the reuse of graves and how we can make it as effective as possible. We can use the land as effectively as possible as people continue to pass away. I also must, comment on the issue of the trees and, flowers and grass and greenery to enhance the beauty of a cemetery. And it may sound like a morbid thought, but I don't know if you've noticed this as well. The Kabrastans that we have visited, the cemeteries that we have visited, where there are all of these features, lots of greenery, it is very much more comforting. You almost get a sense of peace and tranquility. And there's always, in any graveyard, and I've been to some in other parts of the world that are literally just sand. There's nothing growing in there, just sand heaps with no, indication even of who the people who are buried are there. But there's a sense of tranquility that you always find in a graveyard. I don't know if you've found that or felt that as well. You can message us on 061 766 and perhaps you've also felt that sense of tranquility. Maybe it's because you become so much closer to your eventual reality. You know that someday, eventually, you don't know when, but you will most probably also be placed into a graveyard, into a cemetery. You will be buried. There may be some other instances a person can die through drowning and through fire, or they won't know where the body is, or missing. But the highly likelihood is that you will be buried into a graveyard. And there's the sense of reality, of understanding, of knowing that this is your eventual end in this temporary world before, as we believe, you pass into the akhirah. And I would encourage, and I would think that it would be a good idea that there are trees that are planted, greenery, benches for people to sit. And unfortunately, I know in the Gauteng area in Johannesburg, there have been vandals that have come in, targeted grave sites, stolen the grave boards, for the steel content, and have dug up and desecrated graves. At times, the greenery overgrows, and this is again a municipality function where they are supposed to maintain. If you're putting in all of that grass and lawn and flowers, these things need to be maintained as well. Otherwise, it just becomes bush. And then again, there's the opposite end of the stick. So it needs that kind of level of maintenance. And it is a sense of dignity that you bring to a place. And when you see a society that can look after its area in that manner, and again, I'd like to point out another community that stands out head and shoulders above many others is the community of Roshni, and the Roshni burial services, and the manner in which they self-maintain their own graveyard. Many people have actually come to see what it looks like and to try and emulate how they go about looking after and conducting their burial services, because it is so immaculately and may I say even beautifully done and looked after. So well done to the community of Roshni.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty.